P.C. Lewis once wrote, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." Tonight, God is speaking, not in a whisper, not in a suggestion, but in a moment that demands a response. He is saying, "This is the final test." There comes a night when your faith is no longer just words, a night when what you claim to believe is put to the fire, not because God needs to see, but because you need to see. When the Israelites stood before the Red Sea, trapped between the waters and the Egyptian army, it wasn't just about escape, it was about revelation. Would they trust God, or would they crumble under fear? Tonight, some of you are standing at that place. You have prayed for breakthrough, begged for change, asked God to move, and now the test has arrived. The enemy wants you to believe this is your breaking point, but God is saying, this is your refining point. Peter thought he was ready. He swore he would stand, but when the fire of testing came, he fell. Yet his failure was not his end. It was the beginning of his transformation. The difference between those who fall and those who rise is not strength. It is surrender. God is not testing you to see if you are strong enough. He is testing you to show you He is strong enough. The final test is not the end. It is the threshold of something greater. The only question is, will you trust Him or will you turn back? C.S. Lewis once wrote in Mere Christianity, "Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you can understand what He is doing, but presently He starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. This is the process of refinement. It is never comfortable, but it is always necessary. God does not test us to harm us. He tests us to prepare us." In The Problem of Pain, Lewis explains that suffering is not merely something to be endured, but something that transforms. It is a tool in the hands of the divine, shaping us into something greater than we could ever be on our own. This is why James 1:3-4 says, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." The trials we face are not random, nor are they meaningless. They are part of a divine process meant to make us whole. Look at the story of Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, thrown into prison. Every moment seemed to move him further away from his destiny. But in Genesis 50:20, when everything was revealed, Joseph said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." What Joseph endured was not just suffering, it was preparation. Had he never been tested, he would never have been positioned for his purpose. We often think of tests as obstacles, but they are more like doors. They are thresholds that separate who we were from who we are meant to be. In The Great Divorce, Lewis describes souls who refuse to let go of their old selves, clinging to comfort instead of stepping into transformation. He writes, "There are only two kinds of people in the end, those who say to God, 'Thy will be done,' and those to whom God says, 'Thy will be done.'" The test is not about survival, it is about surrender. Do we trust that the refining fire is making us stronger, or do we resist and turn back? The Israelites had to learn this in the wilderness. Deuteronomy 8:2 reminds us, "Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep His commands." God already knew their hearts, but they needed to see for themselves whether they would trust Him or give in to fear. Lewis wrote in A Grief Observed, "God has not been trying an experiment on my faith. He knew it already. It was I who didn't." That is the purpose of every test, not to break us, but to reveal us. It is in these moments that we discover whether our faith is truly rooted in Him or merely in our circumstances. C.S. Lewis once wrote in the Screwtape Letters, "Do not be deceived, Wormwood. Our cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring, but still intending to do our enemy's will, looks round upon a universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken, and still obeys." Faith is not proven in comfort, it is proven in the fire. It is easy to trust God when the waters are calm, but what happens when the storm rages? What happens when the prayers go unanswered, when the miracle doesn't come, when the weight of uncertainty presses down? That is where true faith is revealed. 1 Peter 1:7 says, "These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. Gold is refined in the fire, because the heat burns away everything that is not pure. Faith is no different. It is in the heat of trials that weak, shallow faith is consumed, and only what is real remains." Consider Abraham. He was given a promise, yet for years nothing happened. Then, when his son Isaac was finally born, God asked him to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. Genesis 22:02. It was an impossible test. Did Abraham trust the promise, or did he trust the one who gave it? The test was never about Isaac. It was about Abraham's heart. Hebrews 11:19 tells us, Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. That is faith in its purest form, believing that even when nothing makes sense, God's plan is still perfect. Lewis explores this kind of trust in Mere Christianity, writing, "Faith, in the sense in which I am here using the word, is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods. Emotions will shift, circumstances will shake, but faith is what remains when everything else is uncertain. That is why the test comes, not to destroy faith, but to strengthen it." Even Jesus faced this moment. In the Garden of Gethsemane he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26:39. The weight of the cross was unbearable, but his trust in the Father was unshaken, and because of that trust, salvation was made possible for all. Lewis captured this struggle in A Grief Observed, where he wrestled with suffering and doubt after losing his wife. You never know how much you really believe anything until its truth or falsehood becomes a matter of life and death. That is why trials come, not because God is absent, but because He is working. Faith is not tested in comfort, but in the fire, and those who endure will come out stronger, purer, and ready for what God has prepared for them. C.S. Lewis once wrote in The Weight of Glory, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. We are far too easily pleased." The test is not just about proving faith. It is about revealing what we truly desire. Do we long for God, or are we satisfied with lesser things? Do we trust His promises, or are we clinging to what is temporary? When God tests us, He is not just refining our faith, He is realigning our hearts. In Matthew 6:21, Jesus said, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The final test is not simply about endurance, it is about attachment. What do we truly treasure? The Israelites had this test in the wilderness. God delivered them from slavery, yet their hearts still longed for Egypt. Numbers 11:05, verse 6, records their complaint. "We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." They were physically free, but their hearts were still enslaved. This is the great deception, that we can follow God while still holding on to the things he has called us to leave behind, but the final test forces a choice. It strips away illusions, bringing us face to face with what we truly desire. Do we want God, or do we just want His blessings? Do we trust His plan, or do we only trust Him when life is easy? Abraham's test on Mount Moriah was not just about obedience, it was about desire. Genesis 22:12 says, "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham proved that he desired God more than the promise itself, and because of his faith, God provided the ram. C.S. Lewis explores this idea in The Problem of Pain, saying, God gives what He has, not what He has not. He gives the happiness that there is, not the happiness that is not. Sometimes the test comes to remove the things we thought we needed so we can see that He is enough. We often ask why God takes things away, but the real question is, why do we hold on to things that keep us from Him? Even the rich young ruler faced this test. He had followed the law, lived righteously, yet Jesus saw what was still holding his heart. In Mark 10:21, Jesus said, "Go, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." But the man walked away sad because his heart was tied to his possessions. In Mere Christianity, Lewis warns, the terrible thing, the almost impossible thing, is to hand over your whole self, all your wishes and precautions, to Christ. But that is the test. Will we cling to what is fading, or will we trust the one who offers something eternal? The final test is not just about faith. It is about desire. C.S. Lewis once wrote in The Great Divorce, "There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken." The final test is not just about faith and desire. It is about surrender. It is about releasing control and trusting that God's will is better than our own, even when it doesn't make sense. Surrender is the greatest challenge in the test because human nature craves control. We want certainty, we want answers, we want guarantees. But faith is not about certainty, it is about trust. Proverbs 3:05-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding, and He will make your paths straight." The test will always push us to a point where we have no choice but to trust or turn back. Look at Job, a man who had everything, wealth, family, health, and in a moment it was all taken from him. He could not understand why. He questioned, he grieved, but he did not let go of God. In Job 13:15, he declares, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." That is surrender, not because he had answers, but because he had faith that God was still good, even in the storm. C.S. Lewis struggled with this deeply in A Grief Observed. After losing his wife, he wrote, "Not that I think, in much danger of ceasing to believe in God. The real danger is of coming to believe such dreadful things about Him. This is where the final test takes us, to the edge of our understanding, where we must decide whether we trust God even when we don't understand Him." Even Jesus had to walk this path. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will but yours be done." Luke 22:42. He knew what was coming, the suffering, the betrayal, the cross, but he surrendered completely to the Father's will. Abraham had to surrender Isaac. The Israelites had to surrender their idea of the promised land's timing. Paul had to surrender his strength, writing in Corinthians 12:9, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." The final test will always demand surrender, because surrender is the key to transformation. Lewis captures this in Mere Christianity, saying, "Give up yourself and you will find your real self. Lose your life and you will save it." That is the paradox of surrender. It feels like losing, but it is the only way to truly gain. The test is not there to take from us, but to free us from what was never meant to hold us. Will we trust, even when we do not understand? That is the question the test demands us to answer. C.S. Lewis once wrote in Mere Christianity, "Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he is doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you are not surprised. But presently he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. He is building quite a different house from the one you thought of, throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. The final test is about transformation. It is about becoming something entirely new. The test does not come to break us, but to remake us. Romans 12:02 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Transformation requires change, and change requires discomfort. God will always challenge the parts of us that are still clinging to the past, to comfort, to an identity that is too small for what he has called us to be. Look at Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, but before he could step into that destiny, he had to be stripped of everything familiar. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison. Each moment seemed like a setback, but in reality it was a process of transformation. Genesis 52:20 reveals the purpose. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. What looked like suffering was actually preparation. This is what Lewis explores in The Problem of Pain. Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. The pain of the test is not punishment, it is refinement. It is stripping away what is weak so that what remains is unshakable. Even Peter had to be transformed. He was bold, passionate, but impulsive. He declared his loyalty to Jesus, yet in the moment of testing, he denied him 3 times. But that failure was not the end. Jesus restored him, and Peter became the rock upon which the church was built. Luke 22:32 reveals Jesus' intention. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. The test was never about Peter's fall. It was about his transformation into a leader who could stand unshaken. C.S. Lewis explains this beautifully in Mere Christianity. Every father is pleased at the baby's first attempt to walk. No father would be satisfied with anything less than a firm, free, manly walk in a grown-up son. In the same way, he has given us the free will to walk. He wants us to walk and run and leap and dance. The test is not about survival. It is about becoming. It is about stepping into the full potential God has designed for us. Transformation is painful, but it is necessary. God is not trying to leave us where we are. He is building something greater. The final test does not come to destroy. It comes to make us new. C.S. Lewis once wrote in The Weight of Glory, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea." The final test is not just about endurance or faith. It is about whether we truly desire what God has prepared for us. The greatest danger is not failure, but settling for something far less than what he intends. Desire shapes destiny. Proverbs 4:23 warns, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The enemy does not need to destroy a person if he can distract them. He does not need to take everything from someone if he can convince them to accept something smaller than what God has for them. This is why the test often comes at the edge of breakthrough, because that is where desire is most easily compromised. The Israelites stood at the border of the promised land, yet they hesitated. In Numbers 13:31, the spies reported, "We can't attack those people, they are stronger than we are." They saw the obstacles and lost sight of the promise. They had endured slavery, witnessed miracles, walked through the Red Sea, yet when faced with the final test, they chose comfort over calling. Only Joshua and Caleb had the faith to see beyond the challenge and into the destiny God had prepared. Jesus spoke of this in Luke 9:62. No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. The final test is about commitment. It is about whether a person is willing to leave behind everything that is familiar and comfortable, to step into the unknown with God. When Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, he stepped out of the boat, but the moment he took his eyes off Christ, he began to sink. Matthew 14:30. The lesson was clear. The test is not about the storm, it is about focus. The moment desire shifts from God to fear, to doubt, or to comfort, the test is lost. C.S. Lewis wrestled with this in Mere Christianity, writing, "Give up yourself and you will find your real self. Lose your life and you will save it. Submit to death, death of your ambitions and favorite wishes every day, and death of your whole body in the end. Submit with every fiber of your being and you will find eternal life." The test demands a choice. Will a person hold on to the life they have built for themselves, or will they step fully into the life God has designed? Abraham passed his test because he desired God more than he desired even the promise. When he raised the knife over Isaac, he was demonstrating that nothing, not even the thing he loved most, could come before obedience to God. Genesis 22:12. Paul understood this when he wrote in Philippians 3:8, "I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord." The final test is about what is truly valued. The greatest tragedy is not hardship or failure, but settling for less than what God has promised. C.S. Lewis illustrated this in The Last Battle when he wrote, "Further up and further in, come further up, come further in." The test is not about staying where it is safe, it is about pressing in, pursuing more, refusing to accept anything less than the fullness of what God has planned. If this message has spoken to you, make sure to subscribe for more powerful sermons and insights that will help you walk in faith and step into God's best for your life. Let's continue this journey together.